Everyone. My name is Kate. Welcome to our Sunday morning class with Guy Finley. We're here in Merlin, Oregon, broadcasting out into the world. Hello to our in-person audience. Hello to our online audience. Glad you could make it. If this is your first time here, our schedule for today is that in just a moment, Guy is going to come on and give an hour-long talk. We'll take a short 5-minute break. We'll come back for part 2 of class, which is then an open Q&A dialogue discussion time with everyone here in the room, everyone online. And of course, I'll tell you more about that when we get to that point. Hope you can stay for the full 90 minutes to 2 hours. Usually we run to somewhere between 11 and 11:30 Pacific time. But if not, everything is being recorded, and you can go back to one of our channels on social media to watch the replay. And so we'll get started here, I think, with just, I'm going to go ahead and read the title and the key lesson for today. Just a quick note for our in-person audience, if you could check your cell phones. If you have a cell phone in the room and you could go ahead and turn that off, that would be great. And just a note for you online, if you have any tech issues, just reach out to me in the chat or question area, wherever you're watching from, or you can send an email to support@guyfinley.org. In fact, you can send an email there anytime if you have any kind of a question or trouble with anything, and of course I'll help you. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Here's the topic for today. Escape the prison of worry, fear, and painful anxiety with just 2 words. Here's the key lesson. Hanging on to a handful of anxious, worried thoughts to protect you from what they point to as a fearful moment to come is like wrapping your arms around the anchor of a sinking ship because there's nothing left on deck for you to cling to as it goes down.
Good morning. I would sure like to look out there and see people who are actually in the room with me. And welcome to all of you joining us from wherever you are. I'm always glad that we still have this time, as fleeting as it is, to share the things that we are given to share with one another, to discover about ourselves and each other and our relationship to this world that we're in that we know so very little about. So what if it's actually possible with just 2 words to bring an end to everything that is painful and fearful to you? What would you give for something like that? Because I'm going to give you the 2 words, assuming I survive the first 55 minutes with you. So many years ago, Christ was speaking to his disciples, and he said something along the lines of, at least it's reported, and I can assure you with some certainty that if not the words, then the meaning behind them was expressed. He said, "What man, what woman, taking thought, can add 1 cubit to their stature?" Now, back in the days, they measured things by cubits. And the translation of it in the old language is roughly, who by being anxious can do 1 thing to change not just the life they have, but increase the life they have into something that they will be secure in enough to no longer be anxious. And hidden in a passage like that, by the way, the meaning of which is hidden in you still, is a curious discovery. Because he said, what person taking thought? Meaning, what person being caught up in certain kinds of thoughts would continue to believe that the kind of thought they're caught up in that tells them there is something coming that they need to be anxious about. What person would believe in thoughts that continue to tell them All you have to do is be anxious, and one day this anxiety is going to be answered by the thoughts that you take as your own in these moments when you're afraid. There are times when I get ready to speak, when certain things transpire within me that, in one respect, want me to just go into a certain kind of contemplation over the content of what it is that I'm being given. And I have to push that aside so that I can continue to speak to you. But I ask you, and in the most serious possible way, does it matter the manner in which, and if you will, we explain or otherwise justify to ourselves some anxiety or fear that somehow or other in that justification, in that explanation of that anxiety or fear, that those compulsive states justify the choice that we're made when we're in the hands of those states? Can any choice a human being makes justify what they do to themselves or anyone else when they are being compelled to act out of worry, fear, or doubt? I'm asking you that question. I want a definitive yes or no from you. Is there any choice that anxiety can give a human being that justifies living in that kind of fear? I want you to be very clear on this, because every day you justify the choices you make by listening to. Yeah, you can pick it up. Stay awake. Every day, you make choices that you're given to make by something that is stealing your life as it tells you how to reclaim it. Every day. And the consequence of the choices never show up until downstream, when the action that you put into motion, called karma, shows you that what you chose to do was not in your favor, but ultimately against yourself because of all the derivative dark relationships that it produces as you act out what that choice was to make. Please, do you see it? Please, God, how is it possible for a human being to be compelled by anything within him or her and believe that out of the compulsion comes an intelligent choice? You believe you're making an intelligent choice when you're afraid. Yes or no? You believe you're making a good decision when some dark anxiety or worry rifles through you and you're so filled with doubt, you believe that the doubt delivers you into that which will relieve you from the doubt you're in if you just do what it says to do. Yes or no? How is it possible? I could stop here, but I know it's not enough for you. You need to be constantly fed. How can I live with a nature that promises me, if I will choose as it pushes me to see as necessary, that I will be free of the negativity I'm experiencing as it gives me that choice? How is that possible? Do you understand the question? Can you see that if I feel compelled to rush, to worry, can you see that if I feel compelled, it means that there is a fundamental schism in this psyche, a fundamental division, because if I'm being compelled, something is pushing against something that's pushing back. So there may be parts of me that understand the right thing to do is never to give myself, sell my soul. And yet every day something compels me to do the thing that I know I ought not do. I don't do the good I would. I do the evil I would not. I listen to the compulsion tell me where to find contentment. So that I'm a constantly divided human being, meaning there is an unending conflict in my own nature. And it's the pain of that conflict that continues to drive the wheel that tells me all I have to do is accept the will of whatever it is that I'm frightened by, do what it says to do, and I'll no longer be compelled because I'll get past whatever that condition is. Yes or no? Please, out loud. How does that go on? How do I wake up and find myself nervous, anxious, rushing, tense? How is that possible? Every day. How is that possible? Because it is every day. And to never question it. Over and over again, visited by some dark phantasm showing me what it is that may or may not happen, what I have to do or otherwise live with this pain that I'm in as it pushes me to act out what it says will provide me the peace. How does that happen over and over again? Do you understand? Because you must also understand that until you begin to see beyond the shadow of a doubt this unconscious relationship you have, this complicity that you have with fear, there's no way that you're ever going to be a free human being. It isn't a key lesson, but I was sitting here thinking just before I started, I'm going to repeat it to you. Fear doesn't tell lies. It is the liar. Fear doesn't tell lies. It is the liar itself. We can't imagine that we live from a liar's nature. It's impossible because we believe when we tell ourselves something that whatever we're being told by that nature is the truth. And so when we are told what is true, it never dawns on us that how can we be told what's true if while I'm being told that something bad's going to happen and the truth of it is I have to act, if I'm being tormented by the very nature telling me that. Because I am tormented by that nature. Jump through this hoop. Leap over here. Do this. Don't do that. Get that over with all the time. Pushing, and telling me the truth is if I don't do as it instructs, I'm dead in the water. That nature is fear. And fear exists because we live in a complicit relationship with a consciousness that is divided into what it says it has to have and what it fears not having, what it says must take place and what it worries won't. And if that conflict isn't resolved, then something terrible is going to happen. The pain's going to express itself. So I'll do anything whatsoever to get rid of the pain of that doubt, including act out what that fear, anxiety, and worry tells me to do in order to be free of it. Please? How did I get there? How did humanity get there? Because not just you. Your judgment of yourself is part of that negative pattern. How did we get to the place where a nature that we are unaware of, literally moment to moment, completely unseen, creates, literally projects out into the future an experience. And it projects this future that as it's projecting it, it doesn't want it. It says, look at this. Oh my God, what about that? You better hurry. You better get anxious. And as it projects, the very thing that it's projecting, that same nature, the liar, begins to resist its own projection. Starts to struggle to escape the very thing that it imagined into existence in that moment. Are you following me? And in that imagined state, It tells me exactly what that moment is going to mean, and it tells me what I have to do if I want to be delivered from it. And it keeps up the pressure until it pushes us into doing something in order to act from the nature that is telling that lie. And anything your mind tells you about the future is a lie. Anything your mind tells you about the next moment from now is a lie. And the lie only exists because of a divided nature that measures what it expects against the past where it hopes to cling to it. And then the pain and the conflict proves to you as complicit with that relationship that this nature knows what it's talking about, and I better get ready to jump through the next hoop. I'm going to dial it back a little bit. Let me know when I get there. Keep going. And because of what we are literally given to see, not what is, because of what we're actually given to see, then we begin to expect out of what we're given to see the experience that's inherent in what we've been given to see. Just like that. And the more we resist what we're given to see, meaning believing that this sudden struggle with this future that I don't want, this fear that's threatening whatever it is, the more I resist that, the more all that is associated with what has generated those images brings up all the details necessary from my past to prove to me that what I'm looking at is absolutely the truth. And as all of that is proven to me as being the truth, well, my sense of self is incredibly, inexpressibly, inextricably tied to what it is imagined is real. And my life, my reality, literally is reduced into a certain kind of collapsed thought whose content is made up from the past that is pushing itself into a time ahead of itself where it fears the content of its own past experience that it calls the future. The fear you have of the future is the content of your past projected forward so that it can pull you into identifying with it and then feel this powerful sense of self connected to those states. Please, do you see it? So the initial resistance as this go on is what? It's compounded, isn't it? Isn't the initial resistance compounded? And the more the resistance is compounded, and I spoke of this last Wednesday, I think, all the possibilities in the present moment, which are infinite, are collapsed in a certain kind of quantum field in which the only possibilities remaining in that field are the content of that thought and what it brings with it into that collapsed field. And into that collapsed field in which there's no possibilities save for what fear has identified as possible, then that fear and that collapsed field points to you another field and says, just get there and you'll be free. Can you see this with me? And isn't that my dominant sense of self? Isn't it? Go to sleep worrying, wake up in the middle of the night afraid, get in my car and rush, look at a deadline. Oh my God, what's going to happen if I don't accomplish this? If I don't get people to like me? If I'm not recognized as a real, wise, kind person? If people don't love me, what would happen to me? If I don't sell my soul, if I don't create dependency around my relation, if I don't do that, what would happen to me? You don't see it. If I don't make that sarcastic remark because that person somehow disrespected me, what would happen to me? And so with no question, and I mean no question yet, I become the mouth, become the eyes and the ears of a nature that in that moment really feels like it's someone significant. But if you're following me, transition, is there a self there at all outside of that surreptitious nature that has created the conditions it needs to take charge and then leads you to take charge of them? Is there really a self there seeing anything at all? Is there? Out loud so everybody can hear. That's my life. That is the life of every human being. Milton said, better to reign in hell than to serve in heaven. He was referring to the fact that I'm in charge. I'm the one making these decisions to rush. I'm the one who knows the necessity of being anxious here after all. And so I reign in the hell of a mind set against itself, where the liar, which is this divided nature, never stops creating the conditions it needs to validate its existence as your ruler, as your God. Because that's what it is. So that everything in these moments where we are anxious or afraid, please, yes or no, simply put, everything about those moments is actually very predictable, isn't it? Is there not a pattern, a distinct pattern that starts to unfold every time you think life is starting to push you into a corner of some kind that you have to protect yourself from or otherwise change or control? Yes or no? Let's bring up the special writing, please. Read along with me. I can't possibly tell you how important it is that you understand this. And not because I'm saying so. You've heard the expression, as above, so below, as within, so without. The world that you're in is a reflection of the consciousness that has created it. So I'm not just describing to you the world that we live in its currently conflicted psychotic condition. I'm describing to you the nature within us that has created the pattern that creates and recreates itself. Every civilization that falls because individuals have first fallen into a pattern they don't recognize within themselves. Every civilization. Every lost soul. It's called patterns hide unseen prisons. Repeat that. Patterns hide unseen prisons. Is that true? Let's see. Dark patterns, born in the shadows of life, repeat themselves and, by the nature of the forces responsible for their initial creation, must grow a little darker with each descending iteration. Hold, don't read past that. Would you say that when you have been anxious and then you act out that anxiety and then the condition comes back in another form and you're faced with that anxiety again, would you say that anxiety is lessening? Or would you say that every time that pattern repeats itself, the pain that has actually produced the pattern also is exacerbated? Yes or no? Look at the world that you're in. There's no right or wrong out there anymore. There's no left or right. That's the games of the Romans. That's the way in which a person is distracted into participating with one side of the liar that calls the other side the lie. And lie don't exist without each other. It's a singularity hiding the prison of the pattern that has produced this present state of the world and ourselves as the creator of it. Let's go on. And the darker things become, the more we try to save ourselves from them by seeking salvation in forces outside of ourselves, agreeing to live under the laws these powers impose. You look at the world. What do you think? What do you think the governments, the religions of this world want? What do you think they want? They want to have power over you. But you think that there's a group that wants power over you. There's no group that wants power over you. We don't struggle with flesh and blood. We struggle with powers and principalities. And they hide themselves in the divided world just as they hide themselves in this divided consciousness, always finding something to be against so that it can be for something. And when I'm for something, by God, I know everything that's said against me is wrong because I'm right. and you put 7.5 billion human beings into that crucible, and you have the constant conflict that is plaguing this planet and punishing every person on it, that never finds the freedom that every new set of laws, outwardly and inwardly, promises. You are always making new laws or refurbishing your moral code, your law book. Yes or no? And we believe these laws are necessary if we're to reclaim the freedom we fear is slipping away, given what we're being told threatens it. Haven't you ever marveled at how something always knows, not just outside what's threatening freedom, but how you know that what's outside, if it doesn't align with your idea, is a threat to your freedom? So you have 7.5 billion human beings all threatened by every other being who doesn't agree with what it is that you say is required to be free. But here's what we fail to see, and must if we are ever to be unconditionally free. Love is unconditional freedom, and there is no real freedom outside of love. Which means the closer that a man or a woman can come into entering into this real relationship of life that is a creation of love, the nearer they are to having a freedom that can't be rocked, shaken, or stolen, that doesn't find an enemy every time somebody does what you don't want them to do, including yourself. Unconditional freedom has no judgment in it at all. It doesn't mean it can't discern what's right and wrong in that moment for you as a man or a woman aspiring to know what is true. But it means that there's no self set against something telling it what it must do to set the other person right. Here's what we fail to see but must if we're ever going to be unconditionally free. Read along with me. No dark or otherwise chaotic pattern can transcend the painful conditions it creates, let alone free itself from itself, regardless the promising name it gives to its imagined liberation. Read with me that last paragraph. No dark or otherwise chaotic pattern can transcend the painful condition it creates, let alone free itself from itself, regardless the promising name it gives to its imagined liberation. Don't you always have a promising name that you've imagined that will free you from what you say is the moment, failing to see that all you do is relive every moment of your life, hidden by something that has new reasons for the pain you experience as you recreate unconsciously the conditions that have the pain in them? My mind said, you need to pull back a little bit. But that's a lie. You want to know when you see something that's really true? How you know something's really true? The extent to which you don't want to see it. That's how you know when something true has touched you, when it reveals something in you that you, oh my God. And this is where the dark nature steals the light of heaven. Because the light of heaven suddenly reveals everything in the darkness that wants to rather reign in hell. And when it's revealed, that nature, it goes, oh my God, the implications. And you're right back in the pattern. Oh my God, the implications. If that's true, there's no me the way I've imagined myself to be. Now what? Oh my God, the implications of that. I better run from what it is that's showing me this, because who am I going to be if I actually understand that the whole of my nature right now never stops recurring and recurring and recurring? Because every time a condition comes up, it triggers the past. The past produces the explanation brings the choices promise freedom, and I repeat the pattern 1,000 million times. I know. But I'm not pulling back. Yes or no? You know why you're afraid? You know why you're troubled? Because you think you're supposed to handle this yourself. That's why. The only reason you live in this prison pattern is because you believe that you're supposed to free yourself from it, failing to see that everything you're given to free yourself from the pattern and the prison of it is part of the pattern and the prison. Because it's coming to you from the liar that creates the prison every time it promises that something bad's going to happen to you. And you go, please save me. You need to work. I don't know how long this goes on for. I don't. You can't have a new mind. You can't have an open heart when your mind and heart are caught in the pattern of endlessly trying to protect themselves anytime something threatens what they have identified with. It's impossible. Everything depends upon a man or a woman beginning to wake up and realize the actual conditions under which they presently live, believing that their choices when they feel compelled to choose actually is a choice they make. So let me translate in simple words that special writing. Ready? Bring up the second key lesson, please. No pattern has the power to change itself any more than rearranging the spots on a leopard's coat would change the nature of how it hunts as it stalks its prey in the deep jungle shadows. Let's say I gave you a leopard and you didn't like the way it snarled at you. And you thought to yourself, I'm going to kind of white out where the spots are and put new spots on the leopard. That'll change it. I think they have an old expression, putting lipstick on a pig. Does that change the nature of the pig? How about your favorite color lipstick? Rouge? Hair plugs. Put it on a treadmill so it gets a six-pack set of loins. Teach it how not to be a ham. I'll be here all week. Does it change the nature of it? Can changing the pattern that a nature produces change the nature that produces it? So they're one and the same, aren't they? The nature and the pattern are a singularity. And when you start to understand that the pattern that you presently believe in and jump to serve when it promises that something bad is going to happen, when you start to understand that the promise to relieve you from the pain is part of the pain itself, then you'll begin to understand what is required of you to be liberated from this animal nature, from this dual consciousness. Please? So, how do we change, literally, our unseen response, our unseen relationship to this pattern? We're following me? There's a pattern we don't know that we're a part of. We can judge ourselves for the pattern. Addicts love to judge themselves for the pattern that they're complicit with, don't they? Or they love to judge others for demanding that they stay a part of that pattern when really it's your fear of losing their affection for you that you're really afraid of. And that's a pattern too, isn't it? How do we change our relationship, this unseen relationship to this pattern? How do we escape its prison? We've been leading up to this, yes or no? Can anybody guess? Does resisting it do anything? How about hating it? How about hating myself? Any form of judging anyone or anything outside of me for being responsible for running my life the way I'm run by this life. I'm run by my money. I'm run by my health. I'm run by everything. Does anything that I challenge outside of myself for being responsible for that conflict change anything? Roger's very funny. The whole time I was talking, he's just doing this. Because he wants to be ahead of my answer. Yeah, because he's tried it. Yeah, but not enough. Anybody tell me then, how do we change our relationship to this pattern that is a prison that hides the liar, the nature responsible? How do we change it? Have we tried everything? Yes or no? Pretty much. Not enough yet, but pretty much. So what do we know about this pattern? I don't know. What do I know about this pattern? Huh? It has no power. It has no power to free me. I know that, but if I really knew that, then when it starts to reappear, would I just go, oh, thank God you're here. Let me run down this block of dominoes and get to whatever the magic number is. No. See, every pattern begins with a projection of something in a former pattern threatened by what you're given to see. Look, I look out and I see, oh my God, a month from now, 6 months from now, what if? 2 minutes from now, I'm not ready. Oh my God, I need to get tanks here. I'm tense. Why am I tense? Well, because something is telling me I have to protect myself from whatever it is that's coming down the path. Here's somebody, they're eating their lunch on the folding table at the laundromat. Oh my God. And before I even approach them, already irritated because how dare somebody step into my territory. I'm doing my wash. I paid 50 cents. It's probably $6 now for a load, isn't it? Tells you how long ago it was I put those coins in there. The mind imagines the negative time to come. And the mind that imagines the negative time to come then does what? It starts to ask itself, what am I to do about what I see ahead of me? Is the negative time ahead of me, or is the negative time the divided mind creating time so that there's a distance between myself and the dark moment I imagine, and now I've got to make sure that it's closed properly so I escape without any harm? Yes or no? So my mind, without me knowing it, projects something negative, and as it projects the negative event, whether it's 2 seconds from now or 20 years from now, you're so afraid of everything. Then it says, uh-oh, you don't hear it. What do I do? Or you might hear, what do I do? And the question proves the problem. The question proves the problem, doesn't it? And there's no question I'll be a Zen person. Do you know why I break in and play with you like this? So that you can see I'm not identified with what I'm talking about. So back to my Zen person. So there's absolutely no question that I'm asked by the nature that sees something needs to be resolved that isn't part of the pattern of the continuation of that prison. Yes or no? What's the one question that mind never asks? I'm trying to show you something. The old questions lead to the continuation of the pattern. The old reactions are participants in the running on of these negative states, yes or no? So if the old questions and the old reactions are, in fact, the foundation, the continuation of the negativity of the prison, of the pattern, then what do I need? I need a new question. Not an old question. I'm handed questions, like our political rallies. I'm handed questions. I want to know the answer before I'm asked. So the one thing we've never, ever asked is this. Take a nice deep breath. Watch me. I'm going back into my... Wow, I feel all this anxiety. And I can see what's going to happen if I don't, get on the go here. If I don't call somebody, if I don't eat something, if I don't drink something. Oh my God, is that an earthquake? Oh no, it's my own body. I never ask, I wonder what would happen if I didn't rush. I wonder what would happen if I just refused to worry. Not try not to worry. Not think of ways in which I can stop worrying because I'm a spiritual person that loves Jesus. Not because I identify with what Buddha would do in this situation, but what if I've seen the pattern of worry? I understand the pattern of anxiety. I understand the pattern of fear. I understand it. I can at least see it with my mind. That's why we're having this talk, isn't it? Well, now that I've seen the pattern, what would happen if I just bailed? Instead of being compelled to cooperate with the nature that produces a prison every time it promises this pattern, if I just relive it, I'll be released. What if I said to myself, I don't want to be released later? And I'm asking you, well, what would bring a mind to a conclusion like that? I don't want to be released later when everything's telling me I have to act so that later doesn't come the way I've imagined it. What would happen to a mind that said, I don't want to be released later because I've seen there's no such thing as later when it comes to negative states? What would be that action? Not just the formulation of a question, although I am trying to put in your mind at least a new kind of relationship you could have with anxiety. You have the same relationship with anxiety every time it comes. It's find someone to blame, judge yourself, find something to do to get rid of the problem. Downstream. Because the problem's always downstream, isn't it? Yes or no? You see, that's a lie. This is a shock. There's no downstream. Is there a place in the river that's not the river? Time is a river. More accurately, it is the whole circulation system that produces space, that produces objects. Time, you can't find a place in time that's not part of time. I have to somehow or other step out of time. Because isn't that what the pattern is? The continuation of a time in the past trying to escape the prison of a future the same nature imagines. Isn't that the river of the pattern in that river? Yes or no? Nice deep breath. I have a story to tell you about one of the chief devils. Somewhere down in the smoldering, shadowy depths. It's a good start for a book. Somewhere down there, deep in the smoldering shadows of the heated depths, one of the big chief devils is throwing a firestorm, hurling lava and hot rocks and little imps being fried to a crisp that get too close out of its concern. And one of the other head devils comes over to the main devil there and says, what's going on? It's not that we don't appreciate the extra heat, because you know we love it down here. What's wrong with you? What's happened? I don't want to talk about it. Come on. Well, what all of us do all the time is that part of us stays down here, but we send our emissary, a sort of a second body, we send it up into the next plane above us, into the world. And we go there, and you know the reason we go there. We go up there so that we can continue to goad human beings into sacrificing their lives for the sake of generating the energies that we need in order to keep our furnaces going. And most of the time, it's a lovely job because they're such fools. They're so easily deceived, but something happened. What? Well, it appears, you know that Christine that we hear rumors about and the good doctor that's always helping her? Well, something must have gotten through to her because I was working on her pretty hard. What do you mean something got through to her? He said, well, there I was, and like I always do, I was planting reasons why she needed to be anxious, why she had to create codependent. I have a grand time with her. And for some reason, she wasn't quite as receptive to the usual ways in which I plant these details derived from her past that she doesn't want and produce for her these marvelous full-feature motion pictures that I just drag her into all the time, where she's supposed to save herself, but instead of saving herself, she just gets caught in that pattern of not wanting to be in the condition that I planted in her mind as imminent. Do you understand the story so far? So there I was, projecting everything bad that was going to happen if she didn't immediately do everything in her power to protect herself from the very image that I had gotten her to identify with. What? I said, well, I was adding all the usual accoutrements, the hors d'oeuvres of the horror story. And she just wasn't responding, at least not in the usual way. So I turned it up. And I made very seriously clear the threat that if she didn't get from this point where she was right now, that the pain she was feeling in this moment that I was pressing her with was going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and finally she wouldn't be able to take it. And that's how I always get her and every other human being to move off the dime into the bank of painful thoughts and feelings where they're promised they'll be free of them if they just invest there. That was a pretty quick metaphor, wasn't it? Yes or no? You see it with me. He said, but she wasn't going for it. And I turned it up one more time, and I said, she doesn't hear me say, look what is going to happen. And then she turned to me and said 2 words. 2 words. And I turned into a massive ball of fire. It descended back here, and I don't know what we're going to do, because if anybody else learns these 2 words that she learned at that, I almost said a bad word, at that Life of Learning Foundation, then we're going to lose our grip on humanity. The other devil's going, I don't know whether I want to know or not. What were the 2 words she said when you were projecting all of these terrible things that were going to happen to her if she didn't do what you said needed to be done? She looked at me straight in the eye and she said, prove it. Prove it, she said. Not with that passion. You're not that far along yet. Oh my God. But you can't prove it. I know, he said, you idiot. That's the point. No one can prove a fear real unless they identify with the pattern that produces it, and then in her identification with the pattern, actually create the prison of the fear that she's afraid she's going to meet. You don't know what you're being given, I don't suspect, but maybe some of you can understand pulling the curtain back. It's so subtle. Most of us have no idea how these compulsive choices are born of unconditionally negative projections, and that the choice is to free ourselves from a condition our own consciousness has said is going to take place if we don't make that choice. And when we make the choice to obey the fear, we create the fearful condition we're trying to avoid. So what do you think so far? When was the last time, and again, it's so subtle, you can just be having a cup of coffee, you're sitting in your chair and looking out at, by the grace of God, the fortune that most of us have in this Western world, and not see anything at all other than what the mind is beginning to paint one more time as a problem, as something that may or may not take place, and then say, what does that mean? It paints the problem. It goes, what does that mean? It tells you what it means. You go, oh my God, it says you're right. You better find something. You better come up with something to save you. And then the same nature that produces the jeopardy says, here's how to save yourself. Make this choice. And you're captured in a pattern that only exists because you don't see it. Now, would that it were that simple. Well, great, now I can see this pattern. How many of you can see the pattern as you're sitting here? And when we take a break in about 4 minutes, what pattern what do you think is going to happen to you? I got to go talk to somebody. I got to make this phone call. I better check my face. See if somebody sent me another picture. You don't feel the compulsion to drive you through these routines because there's comfort in the routine of avoiding the pain of being a participant in anything else, because outside of the things that I do routinely as a pattern, anything that challenges the pattern is a threat. What would happen if the next time I'm sitting there and it's subtle, I look at the clock, I look at what I've got done or not getting done, and I have fear. I'm tense. Yes or no, I'm anxious. What would happen if the next time I felt that anxiety inwardly, I said, prove it. Prove to me that what you're saying I need to do in order to be free of my fear. Prove that by answering that, I'm going to be free. Prove it. And it can't. And you know what you prove when you challenge it, when you question it? You know what you prove? You prove for the first time that there's an awareness of the pattern instead of someone living it. An awareness of the pattern instead of the individual unconsciously living from it. But there's a rub here, isn't there? Who can guess what the rub is? You say, prove it. It goes, okay. You want proof? Turn up the heat. Hold their feet to the fire. Show them all of the ungodly things that are going to happen to them if they don't get going and do what they're being compelled to do. And all they have to do, 1/2 of 1 degree, is turn that up, and you go, whoa, whoa, wow, I better say that thing to that person. I better make this plan. I got to get my travel arrangements right. What if this happens? The world has never been more poised on the edge of this question. What if this happens? Doesn't matter left or right, light or dark, makes no difference. What if this happens? And oh my God, there I am in the same pattern that has produced itself since human beings first fell into this divided consciousness. Prove it. And how do you, I'm glad, it's often asked, I don't know if you've ever heard it, is it faith or is it acts that save us? You've heard that, yes or no? Here's the answer. It's faith to act on what you have seen and know is true. Because if you don't have the faith to act on what you have seen and know is true, then everything you know and see is true isn't. and your faith is in fear. Can you imagine how far we've fallen that our faith is in fear? That's a fact. My faith is in anxiety. My faith is in anger. Because if I just get angry enough, I'll coerce those people. I'll make them into something else. My faith is in hatred. My faith is in everything dark, not in what is light, in what is dark. And how do I know that's true? Because I wind up doing dark things to escape the darkness I'm afraid of. Faith to act on what I've seen is true and to prove to myself that what I've seen is true. I have seen that fear is not just a lie, but it is the liar. I have seen that. Now faith would be to act on that understanding and to not give myself over to what compels me to act out the choice it has given me. Now, I don't know if you understand this, and I don't have time. I've got like 3 minutes left. There's so many examples. I had more material. Who was it, Meshach and Abednego, that went down, were in the flames because they wouldn't worship the God that so Meshach and Abednego, they went down and they didn't get burned alive. Instead, they exited safe and sound with another person, with the Spirit. Meshach and Abednego. Abraham and Isaac, the faith to act on what I know is true, not what I fear. David and Goliath, is that not the faith to act on what I know is true? How about, oh God, would that this cup would pass from my lips, but nevertheless thy will be done. Is that not the faith to act on what I know is true, in spite of everything, by the way, that Christ in his prescience understood was coming to him? He wasn't imagining a future. He understood the future because he lived in another order of time, something we don't understand yet, but God willing, we will. He had already seen. I'm gonna prove to myself that fear is a lie, that worry is a lie. I'm going to prove to myself by telling the nature that points to everything that says you must produce this, you must rush. I'm going to say, prove it. And then I'm going to wait to see what happens if, after I've said prove it, I'm going to wait to see what it brings up inside of myself. Because you know what you're going to see the first time that you tell this nature to prove itself to you? You know what you're going to see? You're going to see that it turns up the heat. It doesn't love you. It's not trying to protect you. It uses pain and punishment as a prod in order to ensure that you remain in its service. For all of humanity, you're not just working for yourself. You don't understand that yet. You still think you're trying to save yourself. You can't save yourself. There's no separate self to be saved. But there is a level of consciousness that is intended to be resurrected, that is intended to be reconceived, newly conceived, endlessly. And the only way that happens is when, instead of serving the pattern and the prison that nature produces, is when you begin to consciously step outside of it and become the observer of the prison maker instead of the one serving in that prison. What are the two words that bring an end? Don't try to make anything big. One little thing. How many of you suspect you'll be anxious by the time we come back 5 minutes from now? Prove it. Prove it. I'm going to stay here, now, within myself, remembering my present, in the awareness of the moment, not in what the moment is telling me I have to be aware of so I can be safe. If you're here, the light is here. If you're in the light, you can see everything that isn't part of enlightenment. And the more you can see what isn't part of the light, the more present you will want to be to everything that takes place, because you're going to start to get a little insight into this dark nature. And you'll want to prove it. Because every time you prove it, you prove God's love. Every time you prove it, you prove mercy. Every time you don't prove it, you serve the thing that has no love in it, promising you that love, peace is around the corner. Let's take a break, come back and have our dialogue. that Charlie?
All right.
Charlie back?
Sorry, everyone. There's just a little noise in the room, but it's fun noise. So, all right. Welcome back to the second half of our class. We are going to have a little question and answer session with Guy, and also people in the room here can come up and speak at the mic if you wish. If you're online, you can, well, if you're on GoToWebinar, you can speak directly with Guy if you want to. Just raise your hand by clicking or tapping the hand icon. That'll let me know that you want to come in and speak with him. You can also just send a question or a comment into the question or chat area wherever you're watching from, and I'll do my best to gather all those up and get them read to Guy. While we're all getting settled here, I just want to let you know a little bit about our schedule. So we meet every Sunday and Wednesday here at the Foundation in Oregon. And have these classes, and we also, as you know, broadcast them online to GoToWebinar, Facebook, and YouTube. We have, on Friday evenings, we have a student-led study group that meets on GoToWebinar. On Saturdays, Guy has his special Insight Timer talk that is on the insighttimer.com website. All of this information is on our website at guyfinley.org/events. So if you're ever wanting to see what the full schedule is and when you can tune in, we broadcast all of this for free. So you can go to guyfinley.org/events and you'll get all of that info. And I want to let you know, coming up in 2 weeks from today, we're having a special Sunday of Wisdom. So Guy has prepared, he's already preparing a special talk for that day. And I'll tell you the topic, and it goes along with today, actually. The topic for our Sunday of Wisdom is free yourself from anxious thoughts and feelings with one supreme action. So do tune in for that. It's going to be broadcast live just as we are broadcasting today. There's nothing special you need to do. If you want to get email reminders about these things, you can get on our newsletter list, guyfinley.org/newsletter, and you stay in the loop on everything. And it just so happens that we're putting together a special replay package around that talk. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the talks leading up to that Sunday of Wisdom and put them into a replay package that contains 4 talks. It'll be the Wednesday deep dive, the Deep Dive Wednesday that is prior to that. So Deep Dive Wednesday, Saturday morning's Insight Timer, Saturday afternoon on that will be one of our work party weekends. So we're going to have a discussion with Guy on Saturday afternoon, and then of course our Sunday of Wisdom. So it's going to be like a little mini retreat, if you will. And you can get access to that whole replay package just by going to guyfinley.org/donate and donating $10. So with a small donation of $10 or more, you can get access to that replay package. And what we'll do is we'll add the talks to it as we go along. And it's a really nice way for you to support the foundation as well. So we'll be talking more about that in the next couple of weeks, but just wanted you to have the heads up. I hope I said everything I was supposed to say there. Let me look at my notes really quick. I think that's it. So yes, we are ready to get started with the dialogue with Guy. So if you're on GoToWebinar, you can go ahead and raise your hand now. Let me just check. We do have a couple of hands up, Guy. And I do have one written question from Susanna. Did you want to jump right in, or do you have any thoughts first?
No, we can get started with whatever there's to get started with.
Okay. We've got Imogen here tuning in. Let me go ahead and unmute you, Imogen, and you can unmute on your end as well. Oop, you were unmuted and now you muted yourself. It's possible maybe it was a mistake. So, you know what, I'm going to go ahead. Oh, no, there you are. Go ahead.
Hello, sorry about that. Hi, Guy and team and students. Lovely to be with you, and fantastic talk today. So, this is going to sound arrogant. I could have written that myself. What I mean was, I've got it intellectually.
Oh, wait. If you could please come here and take my place. I'll go live down under with where you are, and you come here.
Yeah, just for a little while.
Well, that's good. I'm all on board. I'll sign immediately.
But there's a but coming. I mean, most of the talk was exposing the way we get seduced by our ego and off track, and it's ridiculously unhelpful. But the other thing is when we don't do it, when we say stuff, I don't just say prove it. I say to my ego, F off. And so I'm quite clear with where I don't listen to my ego when I catch it. Now, the thing is, now what? So I've got to find another way of being. So I just clutch myself and think, well, instead of going out, I'll go within and I'll stay with this. But I need some more help to know what to do if we don't do what we've been talking about today.
You need some more help to figure out what to do if we maintain the existing relationship we have with this prison of patterns made by this nature.
No. I want to know what to do when I don't. I've got it. I've got the talk, and I do challenge my ego addiction, the worry. So I get there, and I'm at a sort of a T-junction. I'm not going to take the worry. I know better than that, and you've told us that. So it's the what do I do? How do I just stay with the situation and not use the worry path?
Oh, well, that's simple, Imogene. We just talked about it. If I decide, and I would be very careful with certain language here, because you're not challenging the ego. Ego challenges ego. You're changing your relationship to that nature by choosing to be aware of what it is threatening you with, aware of the fact that it has never saved you from itself, and then residing in the awareness of that nature, which would include seeing how it'll come back around dressed in a new disguise, telling you something else that you need to do or fear if you don't listen to it and enter into its pattern. Do you follow me?
Got it.
Yeah.
But I don't know what to do instead of the.
No. There's no doing instead. That's the beauty of what we're learning here. I'm not doing, I'm seeing. And the more I see the effect that nature has as it threatens me with the images it says I need to fear, with a time to come to be avoided, the clearer it becomes to me that I can't be in relationship with that nature. End of story. Not what do I do when I come to the end of that story. If I see it has to come to an end, it comes to an end in that moment. Then I have to regroup, bring my attention back, and recognize it's going to knock on the door again in another form. In fact, it never goes away. It never stops yapping. I had a note last night. I didn't make it. I had gotten into bed. It was late, and sometimes when I get into bed, I use my iPhone, the only thing it's good for as far as I'm concerned, other than talking to my wife. Keep your conversations with yourself a lot shorter, you'll be happier.
Yeah.
Because what are you talking to yourself about? You're talking to yourself about something that was talking to you and say, you've got to work this out. And then you sit and you talk to fear. So I don't have to think to myself, what happens if I stop talking to fear? If I stop talking to fear, fear's going to start yelling. If fear starts yelling, I'm going to recognize, oh, that wasn't really me at all that I was talking to. It was something lying and pretending to be me. Now I know who not to be. Not what to do, I know who not to be. End of story. And then stay there at the end of the story, and in the end is the beginning in that light of awareness. I hope that helps, Imogene.
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Patricia's come up. Oh, Kate's right there.
Hello, my name is Patricia. Not only is that crazy, but what's really crazy, and my mind does this all the time, and I'm sure you've caught this in your mind, it'll say somebody else is thinking this, or it's pretending somebody else is asking you this to put you on the defense, and then it's a complete divided mind. Part of the mind is saying, what if this person says this, or they're thinking this? And then the other part of the mind will answer that and argue with it. And this goes on all day. I had no idea how often, well, I did. I've been seeing it for years, but that's insane. That is a divided mind. You know, there's other people that say that there's no such, it's not, there's no, religion isn't divided and things like that. They'll say there's no such thing. All they have to do is listen for a moment, and they'll see their mind not only is divided, it's insane. It's insane.
It is the divided mind that has imagined the God it needs to save itself from. That isn't to say there isn't a God, but the God of the imagination is the devil. Negative imagination.
All right, we have Fiona with her hand up. And there you go, Fiona.
Hi, Kate. Hello, Guy. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Fiona.
Thank you so much for that. Hi there. That great illumination on how you mentioned there was one of those in one of those written texts. It was about it was mentioned the descending shadow, the shadow that descends, that is the liar, that is this nature.
Yes.
Okay, so it's like this, yeah, so it's in time. So anything in the mind and the body is in that time. And it's the lie. And anything that's talking to me, and it just leads on to what Patricia was saying, anything that's talking to me about that is the liar. And it's the deceiver. But however, it's not to say I have been getting into the trap of sometimes thinking that that's wrong, and it's not wrong. It's needed, in fact, to be in this mind and body, to experience that and to really see it. So witnessing it is amazing, and getting drawn into it all the time is just excruciating.
It is. But look, so, because you've said some things that could use a little bit of extra nourishment. I find myself drawn into a dark dialogue. I didn't see myself get into it. I find myself already in it. How many times do I have to be wandering around through space and time in some dream of saving myself from a dialogue that I just was in to realize that that dialogue is connected to an endless conversation the mind has with itself? And then just start to recognize that so that I don't go to sleep in the dark woods. This is what you see. You can't awaken because you want to. Awakening is inseparable from the need to see what it is to be asleep. So it is the need to be awake that is strengthened by what happens when you see falling asleep. I was asleep again. And not only was I asleep, I failed to ask the question, I wonder what happened if I didn't get into this conversation with you. Not only did I fail to ask that question, I called somebody up and got into a conversation with them about the thing. And then brought them into my terror, my nightmare. It's like a really bad game of tormented telephone. Remember telephone? You pass something on? They had a telephone torment. That's what planet Earth, the communication system, telephone torment. Mind talking to what it believes is another mind. It's mind talking to mind, even when you're talking to somebody else. Anyway, good, Fiona. Buckle up, gird yourself. If I've been unaware my whole life of this pattern, and the pattern is a prison, and I gain 0.5% insight into the prison, I am 0.5% liberated from the consciousness that creates it. And if I can discover that the prison is a lie and the nature that produces it is the liar, then I am that far away from beginning to understand what my work is. The reincarnation, the reoccurrence of this nature has to come to an end. And it's not going to come to an end by itself, which is the whole point of the special writing.
All right, I have one written question from Susanna. No hands in the queue. Go ahead and jump in now if you wish. Raise your hand, send a question, and of course in the room, come on up. But here's our question from Susanna. What's another word or words that are the same as prove it? Did Jesus ever say prove it somewhere written in the Bible?
No, what Christ said is, I'm going to let God prove his goodness, even though it's going to cost me something terrible. Prove it isn't an idea, Susanna. Every day without knowing it, when you let fear, anxiety, worry tell you what to do, you're proving that worry and anxiety as true. Every time. So the idea of prove it means I'm going to consciously disprove this pattern and this relationship. Now, another way of saying prove it, and I talked about this yesterday on Insight Timer, if you joined me, show me the money. Show me the money. Show me. Don't tell me. Don't paint a picture. Show me right now the truth of what you say is going to happen if I don't get all nervous and anxious and tense. Show me the money. And the devil can't. Because the only way fear exists is in a mind that divides itself up into something that it wants and doesn't want. It creates time in order to torture you by dragging you through what it's imagined. Come on up, Eric, if you're headed here. Come on. It's early.
Hi, my name is Eric. I think Vernon Howard said something like, or maybe it was Guy, something like, dare to not be afraid.
Yes.
And the other day suddenly popped in my mind, I don't want to be afraid. But then I thought, that was fear.
Exactly.
And it's not that that's a wrong sentiment. I don't want to be afraid. But at that moment, that was fear wanting to get away
From itself.
from the very thing that it's projecting.
Right.
And so, dare to not be afraid is prove it.
Right.
And it's also stay in the oven.
God's oven, not the one down there where the devil was having a problem.
And so, sounded so great at my seat.
We could wait for it to come back. Ever been in Eric's shoes? Yeah. Yes, you are.
My mind isn't connecting it, but dare to not be afraid isn't, I don't want to be afraid. Different. It's staying with the fear, to use those words, so you can see what it is, to learn about its nature. That's prove it. Whereas this, when fear says, I don't want to be afraid, that's a trick.
See if this doesn't help, Eric. You can sit down if you want. I was going to. The pattern is inseparable from an unconscious nature identifying with its own projection. dare not to identify with the fear. The fear gives you something to identify with to prove you need to be afraid, doesn't it? Shows you this, tells you that. Gets you to be identified with the content of your own past, and then says, you better do something to protect yourself from yourself. And you can't. And the more you try to protect yourself from yourself, that's what Eric was saying, the more fearful you become, and the more stressed and frustrated you become. Then you begin to fear your own nature, and you can see the pattern, can't you?
Hello, everyone. My name is Terry. And you know how many times that has happened, right? And then you sit in your seat, and there it is, exactly what you wanted to say, right? It's all good. So speaking of patterns, how about the pattern of a very prevalent pattern in this lineage called Terry, whatever, this need to correct others' behavior. And this talk brought up a recent experience that I had with one of the kids I nanny for. And we had gotten home from school, and inevitably the kids, they play, they want to be with each other, and then of course there's always an eruption, right? And so the older one and the younger one were overdoing something, and all of a sudden the older one, who's 10, and the younger one, who's 5, she screamed at him and said, "You have been annoying me all day long." And then she turned her head around to look at me, to see if I heard her, almost like expecting a correction of the behavior. And I looked at her, and I was actually working on myself during that time, and I said to her, I said, "You just got home from school. You just got home from school." And she goes, "Oh, well, he's been annoying me since we got home from school." And I looked at her and I said, "Well, it is important to be clear." And that just totally threw her, because there wasn't an addressing of the behavior in that moment. There was just something completely different, and that's like her jaw dropped. But it totally changed everything in that moment for her relation with her brother, and she was just totally something different. I don't know. All I'm saying is the pattern. When we don't go with that pattern, and there's all these opportunities or these different possibilities in the moment, something new can come out of it.
You've been irritating me all day, Terry. So have you.
My name is Yu, and I'm an irritation to myself and everyone else.
We have a new group.
Yeah.
Hello, my name's Doug, and I'm an irritation.
Yeah. She'll make a T-shirt for that, right? It made me think the lady who was talking about where in the Bible to say prove it, and there was the temptations in the wilderness.
Yes.
I was just thinking about it. If I hurry up, I'll remember it in my seat, because I'm here now. And you never remember stuff. And I think I remember 2 of them. The first one was, just, listen to me, and I will bring you all the manna from heaven. I'll feed you. And he said,
command these stones to become bread.
Yeah, turn these stones to become bread. And he said, man shall not live by bread alone. Using Scripture. But he used Scripture to show, and I'll just say the second one that I remember, then somebody can remember the third one, which was, if you'll just bow down and worship me, I will give you all the kingdoms of the world.
Because they're mine to command. Because
he thought he's pretending they're mine to command. But like we're saying, Christ is of a completely different order. He didn't need Scripture to justify himself. He saw from a completely different level. He didn't... and that's what it was. We're not saying prove it like I'm going at you one-on-one. We're gonna solve this. That was his way to teach us that there's a higher order in that moment than I'm not going to bow down and worship, which is essentially what we do when we take fear in and take its story and let it. I'm bowing down and worshiping that particular part. that has that pattern that's always said, bow down and worship me. And the simplicity was, there's only one God, something like that. That thou shalt have no other gods before me. What's the third one? Does anybody remember? Anyway.
Climb up to the top of that tower and jump off.
Yes, and he'll save you. Yeah. And he'll save you. But what struck me was, we're always looking for the Bible to do that, and Christ used it, but because he was living from a different order, which is available to us when we say prove it. Prove it means, it really can get bollocksed up, because if we try identification with prove it, we're toast. Because a long time ago, Guy said, darkness, I laugh in your face. And I thought, wow, he's saying that? That seems to be pretty bodacious. How would you say that to darkness? Because I'm still afraid of the dark, But Guy saw through that. You haven't said it in a long time, because I think that wasn't the way you wanted to say it. But there is a different order, and that's what we can live by. And I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah. Come on, John. While you're coming up, a couple quick comments. So let's say I'm struggling with finance because of the conditions of the world, or I may lose someone that I love by conditions I have no control over, and I have fear because my mind, without knowing it, is tormenting me. It isn't that there may not come a moment where I'm going to have to get another job, or I'm going to struggle to feed my children, or I may go hungry. That's not the concern in the moment. If one of you can tell me how the need to do something practical has to bring with it the prison of pain and fear, then you can take my place up here. Our minds are so gross, really dense, confused. We can't understand the real meaning of separating the wheat from the chaff. Christ wasn't just talking about the husk and the kernel. He was talking about two natures. One that is the food, the living bread itself, and the other that brings that into place, but that lives in a completely different world and goes to a completely different place than does the Spirit. We don't understand separating the wheat from the chaff. I believe somehow that my fear of what may happen, that my mind is painting as a definitive problem in a day, a month, a year. I just heard I'm going to die. One day you will, if you don't have some accident. Do you know what's going to happen inside of you? You're going to create the very pattern that produces the prison that then you try to escape, and use all of your vital energies that are intended to show you that there's another kingdom. And I should use this moment to enter into it, not use this moment, not be used by this moment to prove my fear of the end of myself real. All of these things, you can't find something practical that has pain in it. See that. See that. And then understand this natural separation. I have to do what's in my power and refuse to do what's not. If I stay with that, and I understand that what's in my power isn't outside of me in the moment that it's revealed, then I'm going to let what is revealed to me as my own possibilities pave the way. I go before you to make the crooked places straight. All of this intimates a completely different relationship that one can have with this pattern maker and its prison. Come on up, John.
Hello, my name is John. So here's something that I saw a little more clearly today. Something seems to be coming down the pipe. Monday's coming. I got to go back to work. Or I got to do this, or whatever. Got to do that. And it seems like here comes a challenge, and I'm not looking forward to it. So I need to prepare, not just for any old thing, I need to prepare for the worst. So, the devil, the god of negative imagination, gets busy projecting, well, what's the worst that could happen? Because that's what you got to get ready for in order to get free of fear, so you won't be afraid anymore.
And there's no end to the worst that can happen, in case you haven't noticed that yet.
Yeah, so I want to be free of the pain, the heat of fear, so you must prepare, and then you'll be free of it. And the more that I think about how I'm going to get prepared for this, the hotter I'm turning it up in the present. Forget about the future, which never comes anyway. This is the present moment's all we got. The future is just imagined. So this is a pattern that I've been repeating my entire life. I got to see it a little bit closer today.
Good, I'm glad, John. Come on, Babs. Well, Babs is coming up. Come on, Babs. I want to ask ever so quickly, and at home too, what's one of your patterns? Do you understand? How many of you know that you have a charcuterie, you have a display of patterns, but some of them are more dominant than others, aren't there? What would be a pattern for you that you could begin to work with? Chris? Overreacting. How many of you have that pattern? Now, some of us have it a lot more than others. Terry? Thinking about what someone said. Anybody else? No, are you all pattern free? What a bloody miracle that is. I must have succeeded with my work. Yes, Tony? I have to prepare for the worst. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. That's a pattern. Thinking that something knows what the future is going to bring and then needs to protect you from the imagination that's made it. Anybody else? Mindy? Stress about everything. That's sort of a broad pattern, would you say, Mindy? Yeah. Yeah, okay. Roger? Avoidance. I have to get out of bed. Isn't that a pattern? Laying in bed and going, oh God, oh God, oh God. And why am I going, oh God? Because my mind is saying, look at everything is waiting for you today, and you're not ready. It's too much. You'll never get through it. And then you fall back asleep and have nightmares. You're on.
Okay. Hi, my name is Barbie. Eric came up and said that he remembered that Guy or Vernon had said, dare not to be afraid. And then something came to me, and I don't know if this goes with it or not, but I thought, dare to be silent. Because it's the voice that's always speaking to us.
Yes.
Just all the things that everybody has contributed about, like what is your pattern, it's always in a voice in our head. And if we can recognize that and dare to be silent, there is a higher voice that doesn't have words, that's a revelation.
So let's look at that and put it in a slightly different light.
Okay.
When you say dare to be silent, the tendency is then to imagine what silence is, and then be identified with that, and then when you can't keep silent, then judge yourself. Instead of dare to be silent, how about this? Dare to listen without talking to yourself.
Okay.
Isn't that silence?
Good.
Listening? Can you separate silence from listening? Or is listening, really listening, a form of silence? It's a form of silence. I'm gonna really listen to what is talking to me. Right. I'm gonna really listen to what it's producing in my system. I'm gonna really listen to how it's trying to prove that I have to do something. Really listen. And as you really listen, you are proving by that kind of silence that you're no longer gonna participate in the pattern that comes when you get involved in that conversation.
Right, great,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay. She's back.
We have Tony with her hand up, and I also have 2 written questions. Let's go to
Okay.
Tony first, and we'll see how we go with the rest. Go ahead, Tony.
Hi, good morning. Regarding patterns, it's that wonderful verse I can't remember the author, but it says, sow an action, you reap a habit. Sow a habit, you reap a character.
Yes.
And all that, and you reap a destination if you sow your character. But all that, sowing an action starts with the thought, the conditioned thought. And our mind, I feel, having worked with the neurosciences quite a bit, is that there's the right mind that we're born with and is dominant and is about connecting with others, our socialization, our regulation, our sense of being in the world. And then there's the left brain where speech comes in, control comes in, pigeonholing our world comes in, and judgment comes in. And I feel that we are called in any moment. This is the way I see it, is that I'm not in control of the feelings that come up. I am not in control of how something affects me primarily. That is not my control. I can't control that. It's something that I learned somewhere in the past or something. But what I do have a choice over is just staying in the gap between that impulse and the reflex reaction to it. And in that gap, we can stay and say, does this require my pattern, or am I going to think again? And it takes a lot of work, but after a while you start thinking, nothing affects me. And that's what I was talking about, the paralysis last time. It's like, when to do something, when to act is becoming more difficult for me than reacting. I'm struggling with that.
Yes, Tone. I understand. Oh, Father. There's no right mind, wrong mind. True mindfulness, true awareness, true intelligence neither builds models nor lives from them, because it is present to all that is being interacted with, and the result of the interaction is the next stage of awareness, and the action that comes out of awareness never contradicts the intelligence in that awareness. Models are made by a mind that fears not having something to look at and act from. When Christ said, "Take no thought for tomorrow," or "What man taking thought," or any of these passages from any scripture, especially the Eastern scripture, he's alluding to this idea that it is possible, for instance, for the disciples to go out without worrying about what to say, because it will be given to them. They don't need a model. What is hellish has made a model out of religions. Religions didn't begin as models. They began as relationships between an individual who had established a relationship with the divine and then spoke to others about the possibility of being in that celestial circulation. So with that in mind, every last one of us can only work with the model that our mind makes, because we're still dependent on the model in order to make something of ourselves or to produce something from the model to make ourselves better. So you gradually, as you're working, and this goes to what Fiona was saying as well, as you work, you'll begin to see the futility of a model. You'll no longer require thinking about things in order to know what to think and do. It'll just be built into the revelation of the moment itself. And it is as you are released from depending upon the model that thought makes, which is always from the past and the limited content of experience. As you're released from the model maker, you become, if you want to use these words, someone that is no longer an expression of a model. Instead, you are the awareness into which these models come. If they serve, great. If they don't, great. Use, don't use, it makes no difference to that awareness. Then you're no longer dependent upon the model in order to model the self from it. On we go.
All right, here's a question from Rebecca. I'm sure this thought is another aspect of the liar, but it feels particularly difficult in today's online work world's obsession with incessant training and certification, productivity, and continuous improvement to live calmly.
Wait, let everybody stop there for a moment. the intensifying stress that we need to live calmly. Okay, now go on. I mean, can you see, look, everybody understands that because that was making perfect sense until I clarified it.
Right.
Oh my God, I'm being lied to. And here's the conditions I need to fulfill that are killing me in order to have a life. Thank God I'm being told how to destroy myself, because then I can put myself back together in another lifetime. On we go.
Well, and she says, it feeds my self-doubt story, which I know is false, but which feels so real. Any suggestions on how to chill and use prove it?
Oh, God. You see, I don't know when I'm going to get to it. I have some, it might, when is the special weekend? And First, I can show you with words and insights certain facts that on one hand you say you really want, but as I show them and help you see the truth of them, you will see there's nothing in you that wants those facts. You start with the fact that there's a you separate from the world that you're in. That's where you start. That's where the fallen mind starts, in the knowledge of good that doesn't exist from evil, in the knowledge of light that doesn't exist from darkness. That's where you start, divided, fallen. That's where you start. And everywhere that you start from a fallen mind can only lead to the pattern that fall recreates, as it tells you, here's how to lift yourself above the pain. So what has to happen is that we have to exit this fallen state. And you can't exit this fallen state by thinking about it, because that's part of the fall. You exit this fallen state by dying to the identity that it has produced over time for you and all of man and womankind. So that it is in death that I find life. But I don't want death. I want to live in a world where my mind puts together heaven, created in an image of myself. And as you see the impossibility of that, lo and behold, you begin to be willing to carry your cross up to the hill, because there's nothing else for you to do. Then you are willing to prove what you say you want, which is a life with God, by letting God lead you to the only action that finally delivers you from yourself. I think I answered that question. It feeds my self-doubt. Any suggestions on how to chill? Yeah, stop it. Who was it? Isn't it fascinating to talk to yourself? Come on. I mean, it is the most endless, continuous bit of dreg that ever happened to a human being. But I live to talk. And I don't even live to talk. I live to watch and draw an identity from a conversation that I'm not even creating. You don't create the conversation that you take one side or another of. Hear me. You don't take one side or other of a conversation. You are involved in identifying with one side or other of the unconscious nature that never stops talking to itself about how to free itself. That's the pattern. To see that is the beginning of the end of this conversation. I remember my mother, from time to time, I'd get busy trying to prove to her that I hadn't done what was so obvious. And she'd say, this conversation's over. Just like that. And where am I going to go? I go talk to Dad. Conversation's over. I'm not going to talk to you about what might happen. I'm not going to talk to myself about the insanity of this current social, political, religious environment. I'm not going to talk to myself about it. Why am I not going to? Because I see it's a pattern that produces the pain that drives more conversation. And then you'll hear this in the conversation, like Tony was saying, but that's going to make me irresponsible. Responsible to who? To what? You got to sort this out. I can't do it for you. You need your own threshing mill. We'll end on this.
Okay, well, Robert has his hand up, and I'll save this comment.
Okay, then
all
right, Robert, and then whatever it is.
Okay, it was just a comment from Leslie.
Okay, comment and then Robert.
Which do you want first?
Just do something.
Got it. Here. Okay, I'm going to read this comment from Leslie that came in on YouTube, and then we'll go to Robert. Developing spiritually, I feel myself living in two realms at once, and I'm having difficulty staying in this world that doesn't seem to exist multidimensionally at the most. I also feel a sense of separation from reality in that I perceive more than is just in front of my eyes.
And may God increase the view, hasten the development, give you the courage you need to leave the world that needs to be left, and produce in you more and more certainty that by proving those things as being powerless to save you, you will come into a relationship with it is what is all powerful in all dimensions, all times.
Robert, I just unmuted you. Go ahead. Robert, there you are.
Good morning. Good morning.
Hi, Robert.
Hello, Guy. How you doing? I had an interesting experience this past week that relates so much to what you were talking about today as well as Saturday. And I work in software, and I had a particular business user. It was a busy week. It just was relentless, constant, pinging me. And so what I started to see is that I had a different eye under that kind of stress.
Yes.
And it was going on the entire week. So I finally started to wake up and was like, hey, hold on, Dick Tracy. I'd been compartmentalizing what she was saying because I could see her pattern. But what I had missed is that I was in that pattern.
Yes.
And resistance to the disturbance was the disturbance.
Is the pattern.
I stopped.
Yes.
Yes. And I stopped and I was like, okay, Bob, this is you creating your own problem within a pattern. And you're resisting. I stopped the resistance and started to see that there was another opening that
Yes. Yes.
if I stopped the resistance, now I could see what the problem was.
Yes.
And it released all of the pain as well as the anxiety and the irritation because, that is something I must address.
Yes.
Not them.
Yes.
And it cleared up and made things so much different that it pulled me in a different direction where I was free, so to speak, as opposed to trying to have all of those arguments.
Yes.
And I just want to hold on to that experience and what I saw there because it can be applied to so many different patterns, if you
Yes, Robert.
separating that wheat from chaff.
Yes, marvelous experience, an act of mercy interfering in the pattern as it's reconstructing itself, and allowing what you are calling this sudden new freedom. The new freedom isn't a freedom that you create. It is the freedom that comes with entering into a field of more possibilities as opposed to the field of limited possibilities created by fear and its duality. One thing collapses life into a separate possibility where the only thing that's available are all of the associated thoughts and feelings that come to support the fear. The revelation of that field is being released from it, and then suddenly realizing, you know what? I can suddenly see something I would have never seen before. I'm in another level of being, another order of consciousness momentarily. This is beautiful. Now be careful, because wanting more of that is going to cause you to look for that in these situations instead of letting what you're going through produce the new awareness of the pattern as it is being produced, and then you proving it and entering into, through your work, another field of possibilities. It is an endless field of endless possibilities that already exist in other dimensions, if you want to use those words. And you're invited to them, but you can't come in if you turn the invitation into a personal pain party. That's all, folks. Yeah, that's all. Goodbye.